Hey everyone, we're here with another episode of Real Talk. I'm Sean Brown, and I'm super pumped to have Jen Bertrand on, who is an amazing portrait photographer based out of Dallas, Texas. And so she can give you a little bit of intro, but welcome on Real Talk, Jen.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited. Jen is like one of my favorite people in the world, so I'm super excited when she decided to come on. We have been to some of the same conferences. I've had the opportunity to hear her speak, and she is absolutely an amazing photographer, educator. So first off, give the people a little bit of background about who you are, kind of where you're based out of, how you got started on photography, you know, the kind of the nitty gritty stuff.
Oh, the nitty gritty. Okay, well, I'm Jen, and as Sean said, I'm based here in Dallas, Texas, by way of originally Houston and then Austin for about 13 years. I've been shooting for about 20 years now. Started in high school and went to the University of Texas at Austin, Hook 'em Horns, and studied photojournalism. Absolutely bombed at photojournalism, like horrible, so awful. But I took a studio class my last semester and really found my niche, my passion for photography after almost giving up photography, and graduated and worked for a fashion studio for a couple years, managed that studio before I went out on my own. And in October of 2012, my husband and I relocated to Dallas. And so I've just kind of been doing work here and building up my clientele ever since then in Dallas, and absolutely love it. And doing studio and lots of studio work, teaching studio photography as well, which I love. And yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Love it. And for those of you who don't know, Jen is a senior photographer. Do you also kind of dabble with other genres, or have you exclusively kind of fell in love with seniors and just stuck with that?
I do dabble quite a bit in other genres, predominantly headshots and portfolios for creative and business professionals. I've found that there's a market, especially here in Dallas, which has the Dallas market is very heavy with corporate headquarters. And as a result, there's a wonderful market for business headshots and corporate photography. And I do love working for people in that regard and kind of taking them outside of the box. I find that a lot of corporate photography can be very similar. So I try to give people something that brands them as their own individuals while remaining professional, but giving them a little something, a little more fun that makes them want to put that headshot out on social media and on their website. So I do that pretty predominantly, as well as seniors. I don't do a whole lot in the way of families. I do for friends and family, but that's really—
Don't we all, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And, but yeah, that's kind of my bread and butter is business and career professionals, seniors and teens, and working a little bit to getting into the modeling market here in Dallas, since we've got a lot of modeling agencies. It's the third fashion hub.
Well, oh wow, I didn't realize it was. Yeah,
cool. Dallas is a big fashion market. It's similar in Atlanta in that way, where you don't really realize how much influence it truly has, because everybody automatically thinks New York, LA, absolutely. Yep. And then with that also, you've got Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago. So
very awesome. Yeah. So I love how you kind of touched on that piece where you want people to have headshots that are like fun and makes them want to put that out there. And for those of you who don't know Jen actually underwent kind of a huge rebrand within probably the last 6 months or so.
It launched in June, July of 2017, but it was a very long process that started probably in about October, November of last year. I connected with an incredible designer whose work I stalked for a very long time, Brittany Janine. And I know that she's done a lot of work for people in the industry, including Devin Jones. She did her brand and her website. And I decided, it's time. I've spent way too much time trying to design my own logos and put together a brand that I was just way too connected with and couldn't really see it. I couldn't see the forest for the trees, sort of a thing. So I reached out to Brittany, and that was probably one of the best business decisions I have ever made.
And I know a lot of photographers, they're probably like, I need to rebrand, but they don't necessarily know how to go about it or even like why they're rebranding. So what was like the kind of that light bulb moment where you're like, I need to rebrand. This isn't what I want in my business. And maybe it's pulling different clientele, or what was your initial reaction for why you needed to rebrand?
Well, I think first and foremost, we as professionals consistently talk and preach to our own clients about how important it is to hire a professional for those special moments. And, why trust an amateur to do a professional's job, especially when you're dealing with these memories. And that was sort of one of the things I kept thinking about, is like, why am I a photographer trying to do the job of a designer? It just kept falling flat for me. Nothing seemed consistent across the board. And I felt like a lot of that kind of seeped into my workflow even. And I wasn't able to give my clients the full experience that I felt that they deserved. And I thought that, from the beginning, it needs to start from that very first impression, which is, the website. And I just didn't feel like I had it together, and I needed some guidance. I was way too close to my imagery. I was way too close to just my brand in general, and couldn't push past some of my own limitations to bring forth kind of that cohesion. And that's what I needed someone else to do. And that is what Brittany is incredibly brilliant at. And I knew that given her aesthetic, that she would help kind of bring forward those things that I had in my mind, in my heart. And as part of my brand, she could identify some of that cohesion and bring that forward into not just a logo, but a complete experience for my clients through the website, through my client guide, even over to my social media. So it just kind of was creating that full experience for my clients.
Well, I think touching on that cohesion part is so key too, because a lot of people who I personally see struggling with their brand, it's that the consistency part. It's all jumbled up. The brand message is mixed. So how did you realize that was kind of coming across in your work? Was it just kind of self-awareness, or were other people kind of telling you that? How did you first have the insight to say, okay, my stuff maybe isn't as good as it can be?
I think when I was realizing, I didn't like looking at my own website. I didn't like, I would get nervous when I would send things out to potential clients, and felt like I just was not fully prepared. It was like I at every moment I was like, oh, I have to do this other thing before I can send them this thing, and I need to upload this image, and I need to do this. And I hadn't really sat down to really build that together. And I think that, as is very often with a lot of creatives, but just people in general, we see things that we're really drawn to, and we start to kind of work those things into our work. And at some point, we kind of lose ourselves through that process. And I do think that becoming a mother had a lot to do with that as well. Kind of taking on a new identity in my own life, a new chapter in my life. And from that sprung kind of a new version of myself. And I also just, I guess, kind of felt like that work image just was not reflecting who I am and what people experience when they do work with me. And so it was a matter of also kind of figuring out, yes, my pictures aren't 100% my brand. I am not 100% my brand, but when you put those things together, that's what people are hiring me for. They're hiring me for my eye, they're hiring me for my aesthetic, but also that experience. And part of that experience is interacting with me. And after having my daughter, I was, kind of realized that how can I teach her to be a strong young woman who's confident with herself and believes in herself if I couldn't do that myself? So it was kind of a soul searching, not to go like super deep on it, but it is, part of that, because as artists, we work from our soul, we work from that heart, and it's really hard to separate it. So I just thought that I needed something that represented me as an artist, something that represented my brand, but most importantly, what I can offer to a potential client when they work with me. And that needed to be at the forefront.
Absolutely. And kind of when I look at your brand, I think of something that's fun, fresh, modern, kind of a modern take on studio portraiture. So how did you get started with studio work? Because a lot of photographers, especially in the senior industry, are natural light. We almost never touch studio strobes. So what was it about strobes or light that kind of drew you to wanting to incorporate that into your work?
Well, I learned studio when I was in college. During our last semester in college, we had the opportunity to either take a documentary class or studio portraiture. And like I said, I sucked at photojournalism. I could not score. I honestly, my grades, I think the highest grade I made in the majority of my classes was maybe a B minus. Like I could not get that A. And when I would go out and I'd shoot these assignments, it wasn't exciting for me. And so I was like, well, I'm going to try my hand at studio. And I loved Annie Leibovitz, growing up. My mom was a huge fan of hers and had a portrait that she had taken of Steve Martin in front of this canvas. And he's in this white suit with these black, paint splatters on him. And then it's the same on the canvas. And that was hanging up in her home. So that was a huge inspiration. I thought, let me try something different. And the first assignment that we had on lighting styles, I went in there, and when I looked at my contact sheet from my negatives, I kind of just stopped and was like, oh my gosh. I was moved by my own images. And that's when I realized that was kind of the thing for me. And it came very naturally. And so when I started doing my internship, it was also a studio. She worked 100% with studio lighting. And that was really where my natural talent and my aptitudes, I think, manifested. And I continued to build on those skills working for that studio. And to be honest, I really didn't start shooting natural light for portraits and that sort of thing until definitely past college. I think the photojournalism kind of killed it for me there for a while. But I loved being able to manipulate the light. I liked being in control. I liked being able to make the light do what I wanted it to do and create something, since I could never get my hands to do what I wanted them to do and what I saw in my brain, and couldn't pursue art in that way. This was kind of my way of doing that.
Awesome. I love that. And what kind of can you tell photographers that maybe want to get started with studio lighting? They don't know where to start. What's like one piece of advice that you would give them to kind of start building that foundation?
Allow yourself to fail. Just do it. You're going to fail. Like it's going to happen. But you have to do it. You have to make that step. You can wish and want all you want, but until you actually make the steps to do it, you'll never truly know. And kind of one of the things that I tell my students when I'm teaching my Enlighten workshop, or if I'm speaking at a conference, is, I can sit up here and talk to you all day about how to ride a bike. You will never be able to ride that bike unless you actually get on it. You will never know. So that's probably my biggest piece of advice, is just to make that leap. Try it. Just try it. And you're going to fail. So try it again. And then, I failed miserably. There's plenty of stuff that I've shot that just came out horribly. But just like you would do if you were out in natural light, some techniques work, and sometimes you've got these great ideas that don't come to fruition, but doesn't stop you from shooting outdoors. It's the same in studio. You're dealing with light, and it's all the same thing, just different parameters. So
yeah, and I think that that's something that not even just with studio lighting, but just photography and business in general, you can really take and apply, is is you got to go out and do the work, because you don't necessarily know what's going to work until you try it. And some things that you think might not work actually end up working, and some things that you think are kind of a surefire shot end up just epically failing. So I love that you just say, just kind of keep doing it.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, the only thing that separates me from, say you, is just, I've just done it a whole lot more. You know what I mean? It's not that I have any sort of like special powers. I mean, I have my own.
Well, I don't know. You might have some special powers, but
but it's just a matter of getting out there and doing it and trying it, and working through that fear, just still doing it nonetheless. I mean, I still get terrified on shoots sometimes with certain clients, but
oh, absolutely, yeah.
Got to go and do,
Yeah. And then I know with you especially, because you kind of pull from other genres and kind of take a different take on studio portraiture. Where do you draw your inspiration from, or what are you looking at to kind of keep your ideas fresh and creatively inspired in new creative ways?
I draw a lot of inspiration from the music industry, of course. I think anybody who's seen my website or been around me knows how much of a music nerd I am. And I love being inspired by music, but also music videos, the visual component of that, and even album artwork, which I think is kind of a lost art, which is why I have held on to so many records. It really is kind of an immersive experience, but I love, art itself. I find a lot of inspiration, even from magazines, but the music industry for sure, because, music is very similar in that it's about evoking an emotion. And that's what we do as photographers, is connecting people to those emotions through still photography. And I get that visual excitement with music through music videos. It kind of adds that visual component and also brings together the artist's vision in another way, in a way that I can interpret really well too. And I think like Beyonce's Lemonade, that to me is such a perfect example of that. And I'm highly inspired by that project. It's one of the greatest pieces of music, rock opera, I think it's more of a hip opera, but I mean, incredible. So I'm very inspired by that.
Yeah. And so let's talk about a little project of your own, throwing it back to the Hurricane Harvey Relief Project. So back in, I guess, probably early September is kind of when you started this, all right after Hurricane Harvey. Jen started an amazing Hurricane Harvey kind of joint relief project with Push for a Change, and was kind of one of the real leaders and kind of forces to be reckoned with in helping to start relief efforts in Houston. So give us a little bit of insight about kind of what motivated you to do that, kind of how you got involved with that, and really just why you wanted to.
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm a Houston native. I grew up there. And so when all of this was happening, not only did I have family there, but also a lot of friends and childhood friends were in Houston. And just seeing the devastation really hit close to home, seeing video and photographs of places that I grew up just being completely just demolished, just wiped clean. Areas where I went to high school and would hang out on the weekends, just completely underwater. It really hit home, and I wanted to do something. And I was quite literally pacing in my home here in Dallas, knowing that my family was okay. That made it a lot easier, but it didn't make it any easier scrolling through, my Facebook feed and on Instagram and seeing friends who had just lost everything, and even people that I didn't know who had completely lost everything, and feeling absolutely helpless. And I just kind of made this decision that I needed to do something. I didn't know what, but I needed to do something. And I looked at my daughter and just said, what can I do? How can I be kind of an example for her too? So I thought to myself, well, you know, I could do headshots and donate the money. And I was like, no, I need to go bigger. What can I do to like really make a difference? And it hit me, call Vicki Black. So I called Vicki Black and I left her probably this terribly rambling message that was like, Vicki, I need you to call me. I have an idea and I don't know what to do. Call me. So she called me back and I think she even said like, I couldn't understand your message, but whatever you need, we'll do it. So, you know, I said, look, I want to do something with Senior Style Guide to raise money for Hurricane Harvey. And I'm not sure exactly what, but maybe we can do, you know, some sort of fundraiser and get people involved. And she was the one who said, can you give me 24 hours to figure out some logistics and I'll get back with you? And I said, absolutely. And when she came back, she said, look, let's run this through Push for a Change, which was, you know, starting to kind of build momentum. It was a new nonprofit that she was starting. It had debuted just in July at the last Push conference. And she said, you know, this way we can make sure that every penny possible can go directly to Hurricane Harvey relief. And so that's exactly what we did. And we talked about it a little bit. And I said, you know, let me get on board with, you know, some of our former speakers from Push and some people in the industry who are always willing to do what they can for others and see if they'd be willing to kind of, you know, help me out with this and do something not just for the senior portrait industry, but also for, you know, the people of Houston. So that's kind of how it came to is, you know, what can we do to help everybody involved, including the people who are being willing to give their money to help strangers, you know, and that's just kind of how it was born.
I think over the course of a week, I think we raised over $20,000 for relief, which is absolutely mind-boggling. That's so just something that's you should be incredibly proud of, and I think that's something that really kind of speaks to the industry as a whole too, where everyone is willing to help out and kind of be selfless basically to get the greater good and kind of really help out others. So
absolutely, we've got awesome. A really great industry, and you were one of the people who jumped on board as well immediately. I called you up and you said, whatever it is, count me in. And we've got an incredible industry, and if it wasn't for the people in that industry, this wouldn't have happened. You know, I was simply a conduit, and you know, the rest of you guys are the ones who truly made the change by donating and purchasing that product. So still, thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
So yeah, that's something that's, I know I kind of wanted to highlight as part of you. I think that's just who you are as a person, is just somebody who is always willing to help out others and just wants to always do the best that you can do for others. So awesome. Well, we'll kind of wrap up there, but where can people find you on Instagram, social media, websites, that sort of thing?
Well, my website is jenbertrandphoto.com. And on Instagram, I'm also Jen Bertrand Photo. And I think on Twitter, I'm J Bertrand Photo, because I think they were giving me a little bit of a character limit there. Although I'm not typically on Twitter, but Instagram is typically the best way. And then also on Facebook, Jen Bertrand Photography. You can find me there. And of course, if you go to my website, it kind of links to everything. So.
and we'll also put the links down below for everybody too. So make sure to click down below. Check out Jen's work if you guys haven't already. Make sure to give her a follow because she's absolutely amazing. One of my sources of kind of studio inspiration, just because her work is it's just so fresh and just kind of inviting and fun. But we'll also end with one question that you get to ask the audience that they're going to answer down in the comment section down below. I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
Oh my gosh.
But it can literally be anything. Like, I know you're a huge music junkie, so it can even be like, what is like one of your favorite all-time records or something photography related, literally anything.
Oh my gosh. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, I guess the question that I would ask, because I think the music thing is a really good thing, because I always love finding what other people's inspiration is when it comes to music. So I would say your top 3 albums of all time, beginning to end, right? So that album that
This is
is
your
like
question, so
perfect from beginning to end.
top 3 albums. I love it.
Albums.
Sweet. Well, thank you again for joining us on Real Talk. Everybody, if you're not subscribed already, we're going to be putting these out. More episodes coming, so make sure to hit the subscribe button or stay in tune with Senior Style Guys blog, where we're going to be posting these as well on a blog post. But thank you so much, Jen, for joining us. It was awesome to get to sit down and kind of hear a little bit more about you and your story today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, signing off on this Real Talk episode. We'll see you guys on the next one.